Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to give it a couple of minutes for people to be able to find their link, to possibly get some lunch. But you are in the right place for our webinar all about difficult conversations, talking about care, technology, and choice. So we'll give it a couple more minutes and then we'll be right with you. Hi, good afternoon. We are just waiting for people to join us, so we'll get started in just a moment. I think we'll make a start. I'm sure people will continue to join, but thank you so much, everybody, for coming to the first of our three-part series where we are inviting a panel of amazing people to come together to talk about some of the difficult conversations around the use of technology in care. My name's Katie Thorne. I'm the Director of Innovation at the Digital Care Hub, and I'm going to be sort of posing questions to this wonderful panel that I have here. So I have the easy job. And then I'm also joined by my colleague Eleanor, who will be supporting, helping out in the chat. So if you have any questions or queries, Eleanor will be on top of that as well. Just some brief housekeeping from me, and then we'll get into the interesting conversation. This meeting is being recorded. We will share a recording with all of you after the session. And then also, there aren't any slides or anything like that today, so there's no slides to share. But if there are links which are mentioned, we'll make sure those get sent out to you afterwards. Currently, everybody who is attending is muted and we can't see you. So if you do have any questions, please do put those in the chat or to the Q&A. And also, we would love for you to be involved. So if you have your own opinions, if you want to introduce yourselves, please do keep it really lively. So, just to sort of scene set where we are here a little bit. So, I think we're all really, really aware that the adult social care sector has been under pressure for some time. Feels like we talk a lot about workforce shortages and sort of the difficulties in receiving the care and support that people need. And one of the major governmental and national priorities that we've been seeing for sort of how we will support the sector has really been around using technology in a variety of different ways. But social care, I think we're all about personalization. We're all about choice and control in terms of how care and support is managed and provided. So it's really important that we actually have these conversations about what's right for one person may not be right for another person. We can't have a one size fit all approach. And so the concept of difficult conversations was to bring people together from across the sector to talk about their experiences, their opinions on a variety of different questions to do with technology. So this particular session, we are focusing on home sensors. There's a variety of ones which are out there, from having CCTV in people's homes to acoustic monitoring technologies. I'm sure many of them will be discussed on this panel. And some people find this incredibly empowering as a form of technology as part of their care package, whereas some people are worried about their own privacy and what that might mean for them. And so we kind of wanted to have a bit of that conversation about how we balance out people's right and want for privacy versus sort of some of the surveillance that we can see with some of the home sensors which are being rolled out in care. And so to have that conversation, which will sort of take place over the next hour or so, I have a wonderful panel. So I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves to you, provide name, the organisation they work for, their professional background, and sort of some of the experiences that they have in care. So, Adam, if I could pass to you first.
Thank you very much, Katie, and good afternoon to everybody. So I am Adam Chamberlain, Strategy Director and General Counsel at the Orchid Group. So within our group, we have a domiciliary care provider business, which we've been running for over a decade. But we also have Orchid Connect, which is our technology-enabled care service. So the really interesting thing about us is that on the one hand, we come at technology-enabled care from a base of experience in providing domiciliary care for over a decade. But our technology-enabled care service is for everybody, meaning it's not just for clients of the care provider business within our group. We are provided a service for any individual to come to us directly and for any care provider to avail of. So we are working with many, many care providers who are able to provide a technology-enabled care service as part of their packages to their clients because we facilitate it for them. So there's lots more about how we do that, but effectively we've done the work in researching, standing up the service, and we do the work in running that service in a way that can be presented by other care providers as their offering to their clients. So we enable it in the background for them.
Brilliant. Thank you, Adam. And Amy.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for having me. My name's Amy Lewis. I'm Managing Director at Just Checking. My background is that I've spent probably the last 25 years-ish supporting people with autism, learning disabilities, and complex support needs, from support worker roles through to registered manager, through to regional and operational management kind of roles before I joined Just Checking in 2019. And Just Checking applies, I would say, the thoughtful use of technology, of sensor-based monitoring technologies into social care settings. So we specifically look at short-term assessments of need and using sensors for that, as well as designing really enabling environments for people with more complex needs. My experience kind of stretches a little bit beyond the professional as well. So I think my values have been built by and shaped by growing up with autistic siblings and having other close family members who draw on care and support. So I really strongly believe in autonomy and in enabling people to achieve their personal goals. And I think monitoring technologies are a way that we can achieve this when we use them in the right way. So hopefully there'll be opportunity today to talk about, how they can and are being used to their best potential, but we need to be careful about the parameters of that and make sure that it's done consensually. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you. And Kate.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kate Sibthorpe. I'm the co-chair of the National Co-Production Advisory Group, which is a group of people with lived experience who work alongside TLAP, Think Local, Act Personal, if anyone's heard of TLAP. My background for this is that I'm a mum to a woman who is learning disabled and autistic, and we're in the process of supporting her to leave home, where she's always lived, into living on her own. And she needs help with absolutely everything. And so technology is suddenly a big issue for us, really. I'm having to think really hard about it.
Thank you, Kate. Lindsay.
Hi, I'm Lindsay Way. I'm the Clinical Director at Active Prospects, who are a charity that provides supported living and residential support and outreach and various wellbeing projects for adults who have learning disabilities, autism, mental health needs. And we have a special interest area in supporting people who have been in hospital for long periods of time. And we have several individuals that are using sensors and other forms of tech as well to help them achieve their independence and empowerment outside of hospital settings.
Great. Thank you, Lindsay. Mark.
Yes, thanks. My name is Mark de Bernhardt Lane. I work for the Local Government Association as a senior advisor in digital transformation in adult social care. I've spent about 30 odd years in the technology space, about 20 years within that in public service, and about a dozen years in social care, including commissioning tech. So a bit of experience working with local authorities and getting them to sort of understand these things. Um, I see technology as a tool. It's not a replacement for the human relationship, and it should enhance care and free up this relationship. I'd also like to say that my opinions are my own, and they're not the LGA's.
Thank you, Mark. An important clarification there. And Richard.
Thanks, Katie. Hi, Richard Keys. I'm the CEO and founder of an organisation called 2IC Care. We develop a very sophisticated technology called Andy. The beauty of Andy is that it connects to lots and lots and lots of devices. We're over 100 now, and so this conversation is very pertinent to the choice that people have, and we believe in giving people lots and lots of choice. So I'm looking forward to this conversation. Thanks, Katie.
Thank you, Richard. And last but not least, Sophie.
Hi everyone. Yeah, my name's Sophie and I'm part of the Care Workers charity, and I'm also a domiciliary worker, and I'm also a personal assistant to two special needs girls with autism and learning difficulties. So I see a lot of different technology in the homes of my clients and the children. So I'll be excited to hear all the information.
Thank you so much, Sophie. And just to explain, Sophie's joining us from her lunch break, actually. She's doing a shift today, which is why her camera is not on. She's in the car. So apologies to people, but thanks, Sophie, for managing to join us anyway. Great. So I hope everyone can see we've got people with a range of different experiences and expertise here from across the entirety of adult social care. So hopefully we'll have a really good discussion, kind of see where the areas of intersection lie between us, where there might be sort of differences from more of an operational perspective and a personal perspective. But I think before we start then with the first question, and I think it's really around what do we mean by meaningful choice? And what does meaningful choice actually look like when monitoring technology is offered as a part of care? And where do we risk sort of choice becoming theoretical rather than real? I wonder, Mark, if we start from you, because you commissioned tech from an LGA perspective a bit, and then we'll widen out to the rest of the panel.
Yes, I think that choice is meaningful only if a person can say no without losing their right to basic care. And I think that really means it's not you have this or you don't have care. That's meaningful choice, and it requires then a menu of options and enough time for them in their capacity to digest that and make that decision. So it's not about it's only this. That's not meaningful choice.
Thank you, Mark. And Kate, obviously this is something you're having to think about a lot with your daughter at the moment. Sort of what do you think meaningful choice would look like for her?
So, well, I'm sort of thinking about technology as being a way to, on the one hand, monitor really important things like health, which is turning into an issue, but also how can you use technology to monitor whether my daughter is having a really good life and doing things that make her happy and going out and about. So I want those things to be monitored. And I think choice is double-sided. So on the one hand, you've got the person and the family, and on the other hand, you've got the provider, whoever's delivering the support. And for me, in order to have choice, I need access to the technology. And so a lot of providers of technology, when I talk to them at conferences, when I say, can the family see what's being input about their family member? oh no, we didn't think that they needed that. Can the family input into it? Can the family correct if things are in there that are wrong? So that's having that unfettered access would be really important to me, and I'm struggling to find that. And then I think for the provider, they've got a choice about what they do with what they learn from what's input. I'll stop there. I could say more, but I want to give other people time as well.
Sure. Thank you. Lindsay, I saw you came off mute. You wanted to come in.
Yeah, so I think for a lot of young people have more skills around technology than I do, to be honest. So they often understand what we're talking about more quickly than I do. But in order to make a meaningful choice, somebody has to have experienced something. If they have no experience of it, it's very difficult for them to make a meaningful choice. So one of the things that I think is really important is that they have access to demonstrations and trials and open conversation with the care provider around what it is they are experiencing from the tech, also what the staff are experiencing, what they can see and what the family can see. But that those conversations don't go away once they've made a choice to have tech, that there is continuous conversation about new things that are coming out, opportunities that might be there for them, the pros and cons, and if they're not enjoying something or they're not liking it or they're feeling overly censored, and that those things are adjusted and changed to fit their need.
Yeah, great. Thank you. I really like the idea of the demos. Amy.
Yeah, sorry, Katie, just wanted to wave at you. And I think some of that is, and I think a challenge that we often see is involvement at an early stage, because quite often we can make decisions about services and what they're going to look like and what's going to be brought in and how does that look before we actually know who's being supported in that service. So I think we need to make sure that the options that we're putting out there have got that ability to be adapted and to make change. So there might be things that we need from a service level, but actually how we're personalizing that to each individual and making sure that they are legitimately involved in making that informed decision. And like Lindsay said, the option to change this halfway through is also really, really important, because how does anybody know what they want until they've experienced it, until they've been through it? So the ability to, or making sure that we keep checking in, that we keep going back to it, we keep asking the questions and doing that in a way that makes sense to that person is fundamental to informed consent.
Yeah, and Richard, did you want to come in here too?
Yeah, Katie. There's some interesting points here. As I say, we come from a position where we give, almost an unlimited sort of choice. We should assume there's almost nothing you can't measure these days, so that's quite scary. But it depends on who is getting that information as well. I looked after a mother in New Zealand for a number of years, and there were certain things she was quite happy for me to have information on, and other things she certainly wasn't. So it's not just what you're monitoring, but it's who gets that data, and as well. So it's very important to personalize, as Amy said, not just personalize the devices and the etc., but personalize who gets what. You might be happy for if somebody walks with purpose, or leaves the house and leaves the front door open. You might be happy for the next door neighbour to have that information, but you don't want to tell them that they've got a UTI, for instance. So I think it's a very, very vital that our solutions can deliver that capability, and many can't.
Can I just respond to that? Just in terms of, you're absolutely right, Richard. We can capture a scary amount of data, can't we? Just because we can doesn't necessarily mean we should. And I think data is a bit like a medicine, really. I mean, it could be toxic at the wrong dose, and so we've got to be sure that it's appropriate.
100%. I couldn't agree more. No, that's absolutely vital. And the last thing that anyone wants is a digital house that's just full of gadgets and gizmos. Sorry, Katie, I'll throw in one other, which I found it interesting when we start on our journey with 2IC. I assume I'm allowed to name names. People said, over our dead body, would you allow to be put in an Alexa or something like that because it can listen in. And it's amazing how attitudes have changed in the 5 years that we've seen, which I found quite interesting as people become, or technology becomes more, normal in the house, then some things become acceptable and others don't. So that's an interesting area as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can
And
I?
Adam.
Sorry.
So yes, choice is very interesting. Choice is essential. We are not forcing what we can offer on anybody, and we're not forcing it in a singular way, or only offering it in a singular way, I should say. So obviously, those of us who are bringing either a system or a service or whatever it is to market to potentially be availed of. We've made certain choices already in the sense that we've chosen some things to offer over other things. So, for example, in our case, we've chosen not to involve any cameras or microphones. Now, some people might want those for certain reasons. Currently, that's a choice we've made not to include them. And we've made that with good reason, which we can come back to later, perhaps in the conversation. But we bring our offering, and then the way we approach it is, yes, this is our offering. And of course, your first choice could be to obviously not choose our offering at all, choose somebody else's offering as distinct from ours. But within our offering, we don't then simply say, so take it or leave it in all its forms. We start with choice. What I mean by that is, and we start on a personalized, person-centered basis. And possibly the reason that's been our instinct is because, as I say, we have come at this from our experience first of the over a decade of domiciliary care ourselves. So we're steeped in choice and person-centered care and so on. So what we do is have a conversation with every individual potential user of the service about what their circumstances are, their personal circumstances, what their day looks like, etc. So we then talk to them about what we provide might be most beneficial for them based on what they've told us about them. And then to Amy's point, we learn and we evolve. So for us, choice is the beginning, and it's the watching brief. So I think a big part of how you get it is not by simply saying either, of course, you must have this, or of this, you must have all or none of it. You work out what is right of it for that individual.
Thanks, Adam. Yeah, I think that's a really important sort of approach. And Mark, did you want to sort of pop in here as well?
Yeah, I just wanted to say I think that the privacy is a cherished asset. It's mine, and to give up part of it, to surrender it, to exchange it, you need to be clear of what you're getting for it and the benefit. And I think if that's made really, really clear, then people can probably make a more informed choice about the degree to which they are prepared to give up an aspect to their privacy.
Thanks, Mark. I agree. Just a full disclosure here, I'm probably a little bit more privacy minded than many. I won't have an Alexa in my house still, for example, but that is my personal view, not an organizational one. Sophie, I did want to make sure you had an opportunity to come here because I think it's quite interesting for care and support workers who don't necessarily yourself get a choice about the technology that you're interacting with all the time, and sort of your thoughts in this space would be really, really great.
Yeah, so a lot of the homes, they've got a lot of different technology in, fall pads, cameras, but a lot of our clients, they don't actually understand what they do. Especially those with dementia, they have no clue what's happening in the home. So the families are just doing it, obviously for the best intentions, but the clients have no clue. And we have a gentleman who is still very aware, and he understands things are being put in his home, but he doesn't understand what they're for. And we obviously do care notes, and we log how the day's been, how the call's been, if there's any concerns. And he goes, "Oh, are you telling my sons they can spy on me?" So he doesn't understand. He just thinks it's for everyone to spy on him. And it's quite sad, really, because we're just doing it to log how his day's been. But because our notes have to be quite detailed, if we've put, "Oh, he was a bit grumpy this morning but cheered up," he his sons like will moan to him. So it's a shame just seeing how just little things we do because it
Mhm.
makes you conscious. Oh, I can't put this because his sons are gonna complain, and
Yeah.
just like a lot of the clients, their children, they're doing it obviously because they're far away, but it's hard for us then because we're being watched and little things we do. Oh, why aren't you washing up straight away? Why aren't you doing this? And sometimes cameras, they're not for the best interest of the client. It's hard. So in one way, when my granddad was poorly, they were really useful. But then sometimes they're being taken too far.
Mhm.
In some cases, it's for laziness.
Yeah, I think that's some really important things to sort of bring up there. I think particularly when you talk about, is it technology to replace, so is it a part of laziness? We can just put some technology in. Also talking about technology as spying from the perceptions of somebody, I think that is obviously quite a loaded term, but if that's very much how some people feel in this. Adam, oh sorry, Amy first,
Oh
then
no,
Adam.
okay. It's just really on the back of that. Really, I think we need to also acknowledge that monitoring technology can offer more choice as well. It can offer more choice in the way that people are supported. It can offer people more independence. It can offer them less locks and less restrictions in their own home. Like for example, there's somebody I'm talking to this week, whereby they're making a conscious decision that they don't want direct support at all times, and realistically, because of the risks that are involved in that situation, the local authority have a duty in order to support the person in ways that they actually don't want to be supported. So by introducing the monitoring technology, we're actually giving that person their choice. Whereas previously, without it, that choice would not have been enabled. It would have been a situation whereby they were having to have someone there at all times. And we see situations where parts of people's houses are cut off, don't we, so that they can be observed in that way. And I think we need to have a look at what the other alternatives are as well, and actually look at it quite creatively in terms of the choices that it can afford.
Thank you. And then Adam.
Yeah, so I guess just picking up on a couple of the linked points. So Mark's made a comment in the chat there about it's duress rather than consent, and being, and effectively how you get to that based on what you offer or what you say. Now, the example he's given, take this or we can't guarantee your safety. I mean, actually, we, for example, are at pains to say the opposite. So meaning we would say, just because we can provide you a fall detector, we can't guarantee that you'll never fall again. And that's just a bit of an example of part of the conversation that we're having. So in the context of transparency, we're trying to meet the person at a level that's appropriate for them, in having a really open conversation about what this is, and what it isn't. And I suppose the segue to privacy is, just to pick up on another real example, trying to talk through for people to understand. Again, just being very, very open. So we have motion sensors, and we find it's very valuable for a majority of people that one of those is in their bathroom. So as I said earlier, we happen to not have any cameras or microphones. It's a passive sensor that picks up the motion of the fact that they went into the bathroom. Now, we don't impose anything on anybody. In that example, we have a very, very open conversation about what that thing is doing, that thing will pick up the piece of information that they've gone into the bathroom. But then what we focus the conversation on is, why are we doing that? And what does intrusiveness mean? And how does that individual understand intrusiveness? So yes, the system will pick up the fact that they've been in the bathroom. That's a version of intrusiveness that's distinct from a person who's not your family coming into your home to provide you in-person care. You can understand intrusiveness in a context, but equally, we're not doing it for the sake of it. So the beneficial outcome of us knowing whether you went in the bathroom or not is this, and these are the potential benefits to be had. So we do it for this potential valuable purpose for you. That's why we make sure that you understand. and then you still have the choice, so it's not being railroaded into this is a really good why, and so therefore you're going to take it, aren't you? It's just being very, very clear what the why is, and then still offering the clear choice, and in our case we've got examples of people making both choices, people embracing it and people saying, okay, I fully understand it, thank you, I can see how that could benefit me, I can see how I can choose for myself that I may be at more risk not having it, but actually on balance I choose not to have it, and we say that's fine.
Thanks, Adam. Really important. Mark, do you want to come in there?
Yeah, I think we should definitely go on and unpick the intrusion a little bit
We'll
more,
definitely come on to that, don't worry.
because I think it's worth talking about. But for all those general counsels in the room, is that as a commissioner, or when I look at a lot of the CQC sort of assessments of local authorities, there is this digital exclusion issue or digital inclusion issue, and as we march towards that sort of more digital world where more is offered, I mean, there's always a danger of it's not as everyone's spoken here about the choice of digital, it's the choice, as Adam said, of not to have something. And I just think that going back to some of the principles of say you have this or nothing, or is an element of duress, and that goes against the Care Act, well-being principle. You cannot promote well-being through coercion, and as we know, around human rights, coercion, it doesn't sit within that space. So I think there's certainly that legal and ethical dimension as well.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. And Kate, you made a really interesting point in the chat. I was wondering if you also wanted to talk about it here.
Yeah, so because people were talking about maybe the idea that you're spying on the person that you love, and for me, what really worries me for the future is the quality of the support that she's going to get. I think she's vulnerable to benign neglect, for example, just being left to her own devices, not going out and living life. And then we all see all the horror stories, don't we, of abuse. So my concern is monitoring how the support workers are with my daughter, as well as the safety stuff. But I want to know what those interactions are like, and that she's being loved. I want somebody who's not going to just care for her. I want people who are going to care about her. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Kate. I think that is a really, really important point, is that often it's about that reassurance from about a loved one. Having been a carer myself as well for my grandmother passed, it was something I was very worried about when she sort of moved into formal care as well. So I can definitely relate to that. Richard.
Yeah, I think we've hit on some interesting points, and one in particular is, there's a desperate shortage of carers, as we know, around the UK, and what shouldn't happen and can't happen is that the pressure comes on to put more tech in to replace the shortage of carers, which would be a disastrous. We've already seen a couple of scenarios in that case, so there's that balance as well. But we all go to the doctor, we all go to the hospital. We don't say, oh, I don't want you to take my blood pressure. That's just another medical device, as well. So I guess we've got both sides of the argument of we often get all sorts of measurements taken about us, whether it's weight or temperature or blood oxygen levels, etc. And people don't think twice about that. And so is it any different if it's in your home? Maybe not. But yeah, there is a real both sides of that spectrum. So I just throw that in for a controversial sort of way of looking at it.
Sure. We'll go to Amy, Adam, Lindsay, and then we'll move on to the next question, coming back to least intrusive, I think.
Thank you. I just think, just picking up on Kate's point, I think that's always, we find it's always a really contentious point if you bring up the idea of monitoring, that will be monitoring staff and not the person. Then there's, you know, as most people on this call will recognise, there's a lot of pushback from staff around that situation. But just doing a bit of the Richard style, I think, to raise a contentious point, I think culturally we need to think about the impact of the family role, and that actually professionally we've often isolated and removed family from the caring position, and actually they should absolutely be part of that caring circle, and for a lot of families they are the carer, and the professional side of things is very limited. So I would say it's a family decision actually, and there's another choice factor there, isn't there? It's not, obviously we put the person's needs and wants and desires at the middle of everything, and they have to be the absolute priority. But there's also, it's not that black and white. It's not that simple. There's also a family role and choice within that. And the second point I'd make around that is that that we are very accepting, and we kind of assume the position of that it's okay for staff monitoring within a group setting. So in a care home, for example, it would be standard, it would be expected practice that we have a senior on duty or a manager on duty that's observing staff practice. And we do need to consider isolated services. We do need to consider the risks and the safeguards that we need to put in place in those isolated services. And actually, in some of those settings, perhaps this is a way to support that, to safeguard people as people carry out their duties.
Thanks, Amy. Adam.
Yeah, so Mark's mentioned a couple of times that, you know, there's no choice if what you're told is if you don't accept the tech, you can't get care. And equally, there's a comment in the chat from Chris where he's referenced that he worries that tech could be used to potentially inappropriately cut direct support hours. Picking up on those points, we're very much, we've always been where Richard is as well, in the sense that nothing that we're doing about technology is intended, it has been designed or created to replace people. It's all intended to be assistive. What we do foresee is that the volumes of the groups of people that we all want to reach more of, to do more in looking after, are growing enormously. They're exploding. Both for older age needs, for learning disabilities, all of it. And, you know, the valuable human element of care, be it family or professional, it is relatively finite, and compared to those increasing volumes that people we're trying to meet, will be relatively reducing over time. So we foresee the need for there to be more technology in the mix to reach as many people as possible. The way we see that combination playing out is that where appropriate, technology does more and more of the work of the sort of fundamental checking that people are okay. And yes, also a lot of the preventative understanding information that informs and involves care plans and so forth. But that in that process, yes, a single individual may have a bit less in-person care support, sort of coming directly to Chris's point. But we see that very positively, in the sense that what we hope will arise is that the tech will do more and more of the heavy lifting of where at the moment valuable humans are being made to run around to just go in and check people are just okay. And increasingly we can position the human side of things to much more meaningful, valuable interactions. I think linked with Kate's point about worrying about what is happening with carers to an individual, I think it's limited what technology can do about that. Of course, you can see some things that are going on, but I think the link to what I'm saying is that as you increase capacity in the delivery and the management of the human in-person care, so you have more time and options about how you make sure that's really valuably done and really and safely done. So I think, yes, there may be a little bit less direct support hours because technology helps, but I hope the point will be that the in-person care actually becomes more valuable. And for those families who are worried about how it's being delivered, there's more time available to manage what's going on with that. So I'm not sure that technology will be the answer for a family member to really feel the confidence that somebody's being well looked after. But I think technology, it directly, but I think technology can provide the space to then have more time to make sure that the human piece is happening really, really well.
Thanks, Adam. Lindsay.
I was just going to add in there on what Adam was saying around sometimes having less staffing is a real positive. Like if we think particularly about nighttime checks, so if someone has a person checking every hour, every half an hour that they are asleep in bed, that means someone's got to open the door whilst you're asleep in your bed and check that you're still in your bed and you're still asleep, which can easily be done with assistive tech. It can easily be done in another way, and that means your sleep cycle isn't being interrupted by a door being opened and a light coming on and someone being present. So the advantage, it's really about thinking about quality of life. It's about thinking around someone's well-being. Where do they need someone there to support their well-being? That might be emotional support or helping you to maintain your independence in a practical way. And where does the presence of a person actually impact your well-being? It taking away your privacy, denying you independence, etc. So I think those are the conversations that need to be had.
Thanks, Lindsay. Mark.
I couldn't find an applaud button to what Adam said. I think we can't lose sight, with all this data, we mustn't let go of the or let a data-rich environment become a relationship poor one. And we should be really measuring its success by how much data, not about how much data that we actually collect, but how much human connection we can sort of protect from this. And there is this danger, I think, of moving from this kind of idea that I'm checking in on you, and let's face it, that kind of social connection, experiencing loneliness and having someone coming in and having that human contact often is the most memorable and the part of care that we probably don't commission against the heart-based care. But if we just turn it into a dashboard, then we just look at the metrics, not the person. And technology, can't measure, it can't monitor loneliness in a way that a care worker can. But we've got to make sure the 10 minutes, saved through the technology belongs to the person, not back in the budget. But I think we just need to guard against digital complacency, which might undermine professional curiosity of what the data is not actually telling us.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. I think that sort of digital complacency also picks up the point Sophie made earlier as well about sort of over-reliance on sort of this technology. I did want us to circle back to the conversation we were having before about how intrusive technology can be, and how do we decide what counts as the least intrusive option, the most privacy enhancing option, and sort of I think you mentioned, Adam, that you've made a choice as an organization, for example, that you won't be using cameras and microphones. I wondered if maybe you wanted to come in first, explain sort of how you came to that decision, and then we'll ask the rest of the panel about sort of their opinions on least intrusive tech.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, some of how we came to our choices of what we offer as choices, possibilities to people, was simply through all our testing and trialing and so forth of what what works well, what doesn't. But we did a lot of thinking about and talking to people about were there to be something like this available. What of it might you prefer, might you struggle with more, and so on. I think generally we know that this is very new to everybody. We operate in a world as well that within our group that deals in units of hours of domiciliary care, that we've got peers who are dealing in rates of weeks of being in a care home. We sell wheelchairs and profile beds and so forth. There's a lot of things that we know in the sector that people know really well and understand. As much as all of us who are dealing in and spend years planning towards technology for care, for the world as a whole, it's very, very new, and people don't really know what this is, how this will help them, and so forth. So, we know that in order to sort of start to build the awareness and confidence of people in why they should positively choose this at all, we need to not rush at our version requiring loads of things of them that they're going to really struggle to come to terms with. So we felt that we know that in the absence of other options in the past, lots of and currently family they choose a Ring doorbell, or they choose the likes of a security camera, or you might want a sort of microphone intercom type thing to be able to talk to people and so forth. There are things that are used, but I guess because a big part of what we're doing is about prevention and preventative, we are sort of picking up more a great volume of insights and more regular insights than simply seeing if somebody's in a certain room. Part of it for us is that we've deliberately provided options that means we move away from a sort of single point of reliance or failure in terms of having a handle on what people's routine is looking like, whether they're being able to maintain it well. So a single camera might tell you that somebody's in that room or gone out of there or what have you. It doesn't build a picture of what's going on for somebody, the subtle gradual changes of how things are evolving for them. So it's partly what do we think there's value in what we're doing, but it definitely was partly, look, if we're going to go and talk to people about the fact that yes, monitoring, because it involves monitoring of them is going on here. Which version of it are they more likely to come to terms with? And in our view, A, they were less likely to come to terms with, and B, we didn't feel like there was as much value in the cameras and microphones side of things.
Adam, that's really, really helpful, really interesting. Amy, what are your views on this?
I totally agree with Adam. Like we take on a very similar philosophy, and we've had that philosophy for over 20 years. So it's not like I think it's just something about how humans feel about being observed with a video camera that you can actually see that. We often find that when we show people actually the data, and this is part of informed consent, isn't it? Like showing people what is it that the other person can see, and then having a real feel of what it is that person's doing with that information helps them to understand whether they feel like it would be intrusive, because whether that information that they're viewing is personal and private to me. So I think that's a big part of it. We always say particularly about long-term monitoring, is that if it ends up being more restrictive than the alternatives, then it's not right for that situation, it's not right for that person. And I suppose there is probably a bit more grey to that than we give it credit, in the sense that perhaps sometimes there are scenarios where you would observe people more hours than you would previously, but actually there's a risk factor. So then we're talking about balance, aren't we, again? And we also say that it's about how that monitoring feels to that person, and I think that's just the bottom line. Like for the person, there's multiple people that I can think of that actually, one person that had been in a hospital, very restrictive, institutionalized setting for years on years, decades on decades actually. For them, the direct support by support staff is incredibly distressing, and he says that they're taking advantage of him, and that is not the methodology of support that he is subscribing to or choosing. And actually the alternative, being able to provide that, is obviously less intrusive to him personally. So it's all about that individual situation, but also looking at, like balancing that with the alternative of what you would be approaching.
Thanks, Amy. And Lindsay, obviously you do a lot of work in that sort of people moving out of long-term hospital care. Did you want to also add in on that?
Yeah, I was going to come in on exactly that, and I appreciate it's a very different use case maybe than supporting the elderly. And my mum is in a residential home, so I can see that side of the conversation as well. But I think when we're talking about what is the least intrusive, what is intrusive depends on what the person finds intrusive. So it's a very personal experience what is intrusive. And as Amy was giving that example there, I can think of 3 or 4 more where having a person in your home, in your space, observing or supporting you, which may be considered highly necessary in order to maintain safety, a person would be considered far more intrusive. The individual receiving the support would consider that far more intrusive than having a movement sensor or even a camera. There's a couple of people who have said to me, I'd rather you had a camera, but I didn't have a person, because the trauma that they have been through, a person can cause them harm, whereas in their view, a camera isn't going to do that. So I think your personal experience of intrusion is the vital thing. It's about having those conversations around that. And I think where a family may not always, sometimes will, but may not always understand the experience of having tech or being monitored in that way, a peer advocate might. So someone who has a similar life experience and may also be a very valuable voice for those people that lack capacity.
Thanks, Lindsay. Richard.
Yeah, we've got an interesting scenario where our solution, Andy, provides both reactive care, so it does all the buttons and things, as well as the proactive preventative side. And we've had a gentleman said, "Don't give me a button. I will never, ever, ever, ever press it." He says, "I don't mind if Andy presses it for me, but I won't press it myself," which I find it's quite amusing. So he obviously didn't mind the monitoring side. But one of the other aspects might be of note, and this is something we took very seriously, is we don't provide reports of saying mum went to bed this time and mum did this and mum had a cup of tea and mum went to the loo. What we tend to do is work on alerts. So only when the wheels have fallen off, something's happened that warrants somebody knowing something. But it's strangely, we're under greater pressure to produce reports. I want to know what's going on. Well, that could be deemed obtrusive, whereas the Andy platform we try as much as we can to do the opposite, to say, just let people know the right information if something has gone wrong. So you're not being spied on at all. I mean, as I say, sadly, our pressure is coming from care organisations who are saying, well, I want to see paper-based reports after the fact, which I personally find that a wee bit more intrusive, but it's an interesting discussion for consideration.
Yeah, I see. Mark was nodding on that point, so I don't know, Mark, if you wanted to also add on there.
Well, I think for me, it's just picking up on what Lindsay said a little bit more, because having someone coming into your house, can be more intrusive than having a bit of technology there. And I said I feel like a bit of a Luddite taking an opposing view, which I'm not. I'm a firm believer in technology, but I think having a sensor in your house is like inviting a guest into your house 24/7, and to live there. So it might have a different quality to it, and I think intrusion should be measured by dignity. Not tech specs, and I think that dignity is something which underpins the essence of human rights. Everyone is born sort of, to be treated fairly and equally with dignity. And I think when we're looking at intrusion, actually having a look at whether or not it's legal. Is there a specific law, giving reason for this? That might be a Mental Capacity Act. Is it absolutely necessary, this intrusion? Is there documented significant risk to life or others? And touching on, I think what everyone else said here is that, is it proportional? Is the intrusion proportional? Is this the quietest way to solve the problem? If a floor sensor works, then it is a camera overreach.
Thank you, Mark. I think this sort of shows sort of some of the wide range of views even amongst this panel, isn't it? Where you've got some people who are much more maybe skeptical of some of the technology and others who aren't. Go to Adam and then Kate and then Amy.
Thanks, Katie. So I would say we're in a slightly different position to what Richard just referred to around reporting. So what I mean by that is that it's actually a big part of our value add, a key part of our service that we I'll put it like that, provide reporting. The reason we've organized ourselves that way deliberately is because that it's with the richness of the information that we see the innovation. So our service includes the reactive and the proactive and the potentially preventative. So we provide all the safety stuff, but that bit isn't new. That's decades old legacy technology. Effectively, you're using that stuff when, as Richard referred to, there's already a problem. Now, I appreciate Richard was partly referring to, you may on a personalized basis choose what an alert or problem scenario for that individual looks like, and you may only be alerted to that. I know that Richard will have the technology to see all the stuff preventatively as well and to report on it if that's what people wanted. But we're very much in it for the innovation of the preventative. How we see that working, how it is working, is that with the richness of the information, so you see the subtle gradual changes in how somebody's coping with their routine. And so that information is already very valuably informing the evolution of care plans, how people are being looked after in a way that we know from some experience already in other settings is actually providing the preventative benefits. So people are less ending up in hospital because they had fewer falls, because they didn't get the UTI in the first place, because through the monitoring and reporting on the gradual changes in their ability to maintain a hydration routine, so there was able to be an intervention about supporting their hydration routine so they didn't get the infection that prompted the fall, etc. So it's a huge value piece for why we actively provide reporting. But what I would finish by saying is, the key point is anything we do or don't do is all by consent. So we have the ability, the option, and it's a key part of what we are deliberately offering. But like with everything else I talked about earlier, we're absolutely transparent about what could be reported on, what might be chosen to be reported on, and then people can choose together, the individual, the family, the care provider, etc., what reporting they would like to benefit from or not. So they don't have to, but we see there's a great value to it.
Thanks, Adam. And Kate, it'd be really interesting, I think, here to hear your perspective as well.
Thanks. So yes, from listening to others, I come down to it's horses for courses. So someone like my daughter, doesn't use speech to communicate. She's got very little understanding of anything. She could never consent to anything. She would have no understanding of there being a camera or anything else going on in terms of monitoring what's going on. So my maternal, loving inclination is that I want to monitor everything because I want to see she's having the best life. Interestingly, we've started getting support from a new provider, 2 support workers. They're both lovely. And that's sort of making me think, well, maybe we don't need cameras because I've got to know them and I've built trust with them. So for me, there's a whole issue around how support and providers co-produce what's actually delivered. So you put the question in about, what do you do if there's disagreement? And I think it's all about co-producing, having conversations. So I would expect people to sit down together to listen to all sides, to understand what the concerns are about how intrusive or not it is, and to have an approach that's based on like the best interest approach. You'd have a set of questions maybe you'd work through, and ultimately you're going to have to reach consensus. I'd always say you're aiming for consensus, and if you can't, then I'd be saying, okay, so we'll try one way or the other, but you need to build in then really soon afterwards some sort of other conversation to talk about how it's gone and whether it needs to change or not. And I think it's that constant talking about it. It's about not having technology in place and then thinking that's the solution and walking away from it. You need to be talking about it all the time and what you're getting out of it. And I also think there's some intrusion around the language that's used in technology. And I think we need to use very human kitchen table language that makes sense to people. So not talking about hydration, but talking about having a drink. Really, really basic, and things like the language of people saying so and so refused something or they were non-compliant. You need to understand what's going on for the person. So for me, it always comes back to that person-centered perspective and conversations and co-producing.
Thank you, Kate. I think that's just really important to hear as well. Amy, did you want to comment on that? And also, I've seen that Sophie's put something in the chat, so maybe Sophie will bring you in after Amy as well.
Yeah, and perhaps the refusal is just choice, maybe, Kate. That's what we're saying, I think. I totally agree with what Richard was saying about only monitoring what you need to. I think that's really important about how people feel about the data side of things specifically. But there is, as Adam said, a real benefit, and we've seen it time and time again, of using that data, using that reporting to give people a voice with their actions where they can't deliver that necessarily all the time with their voice. And we've seen this time and time again. So we've seen it with older adults who, maybe an older person's got dementia and they're struggling to reassure and show their family that they're okay to stay at home and that's what they want to do, and that's what they're asking for. But everybody's worried about the risks of that and what that looks like. And by using that data, using that information, we're actually reducing the restrictions. We're actually enabling somebody to have their choice and live the life they want to, and not kind of escalate the care requirement beyond what is the actual requirement because of our worries or our concerns. And I've seen other situations where actually the person being supported and the staff team were using it in a kind of short-term way in order to bring somebody out of hospital quicker, in order to write that care plan and deliver that assessment thoroughly in a new space, in a new setting. And they've clearly cared. So the staff member said that we absolutely wouldn't have got a thorough picture of that person's support needs without that happening. And the person being supported was saying, yeah, like it's helped me to deliver the care plan that I wanted and needed, or the support plan that I wanted and needed. So I think, again, we're talking about balance here, aren't we? And individualization and personalization and making sure that it's the right job for the situation, the right tool for the situation, sorry.
Thank you, Amy. And Sophie, you sort of put into the chat about sort of trusting in carers. I wondered if you wanted to talk about that as well.
Yeah, I agree with Richard. Only monitoring what you need to, and especially like if a client's come out of hospital and they need more observations. But as a carer who, like, I treat all my clients how I'd want my grandparents to be treated, I understand there's good carers, there's bad carers, but it just makes you feel rubbish, because why would you have carers if you couldn't trust them around your family? That's what I think, especially when because with our clients, their families are sometimes on the cameras obsessively and monitoring them if they're not eating properly or if they need help with certain things. It's just frustrating when it's being taken too far and it is just obsessive and almost nitpicking. Why would you have the carers around your family if you couldn't trust them without supervising them over the cameras?
Sophie, I think there is sort of a tension there, obviously, between sort of all of the different parts of the system. And I think going back to what Kate said before as well about that conversation and that trust, I think trust is such a foundational value of social care. And it's something that, if we can't trust each other, the very basics of this all falls down. So thank you for that. I did also want to pick up on another topic which has been briefly mentioned, but we're talking a lot about it's people's choice about the technology within certain limits and parameters potentially. But I wanted to talk about what happens if someone refuses monitoring technology, even though that's something which would reduce their risk of harm to themselves, right? And how should, as a service, so maybe coming to Adam and Lindsay first, how do you respond where somebody very rightfully turns around and goes, no, I don't want any monitoring equipment. This isn't something that is right for me. And sort of what should the approach be there where people say no, basically?
Well, were you asking me first, Katie?
You've unmuted first, so you can go first, Adam. We'll bring Lindsay in as well.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the way I would begin framing the answer to that is, I suppose, partly by referencing a slightly different version of the same conversation we have a lot with people. We explain what our service and system and so forth can do, and people are keen to try and understand it, and so they ask their questions. And they might say things like, but my husband lives with me as well, or I've got a pet, or I use two bathrooms, or whatever it is. Things about the fact that it's imperfect, and that their line of questioning is around sort of the premise of it seems to be, well, if you've created something, it must be to cover every scenario. So what we explain is that no, we're not professing that. That we obviously believe that there's value to this, which is why we're suggesting it at all, and we've created it. But it's not pretending to be able to do everything or be an absolutely complete picture, etc. So we talk through the realism of what is happening and not happening and so forth. So people build their understanding of what's possible. I mean, ultimately, part of why I'm saying that is that we are not expecting a perfect world in any sense, neither because technology-enabled care comes along in any form from any provider, nor because of how in-person care is delivered. So it's about having a very real conversation about what's going on here. So because we've always anticipated it being assistive in whatever personalized form makes sense for that individual or not at all, and slightly linking to Mark's point earlier about imagining a world in which if you don't accept the tech, you don't get care. We've never seen it like that. We see the need in the round for tech to come into the mix. We don't want a world in which it's a binary choice, or if you don't get the tech, you don't get any option. So from our perspective, it's very much a case of there are benefits to this generally. Having had a personalized conversation, there could be benefits of this for you directly, specifically, but it's absolutely your free choice. It doesn't make sense for us. It's just our perspective to try forcing something on somebody. If it's not right for them, we need to move on. But part of what I'm saying in my answer is that I don't expect that to mean that suddenly that's a void for that person. It should never be that it's technology or no other option. We should be looking at the array of care related options for people, and the why we provide the service we are to many care providers is so that they can do just that. They can now, because it now exists, they can now offer to their clients a blend, a hybrid, a combination of the right bit of technology that supports what's going on for them, the in-person care, other activities like picking up their medication, whatever it is. It's part of the mix that either has value for that person or not. But even if it does, they can choose it or not. So that there must still be other options for people if the tech isn't right for them, or even if it could be, they don't want it.
Thanks, Adam. Lindsay, did you want to add anything there?
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately, if somebody really doesn't want to use assistive tech, my first point of call would be trying to understand why. And is it something that maybe the tech buzzes, or it has a little light that goes on and off in the corner, and so there's a practical, physical, tangible reason they don't want that tech. If it is more that they don't want to be monitored, they don't want data to be shared, then and if they have capacity to make that decision, then that is the decision they're making, and we have to support them with that and continue to provide the support that they need in other ways. I've never come across someone yet, and I'm worried now that I may be missing something, who's been told if you don't have tech, you're not having care. But maybe that's just luck so far. I haven't come across. So I also think if someone lacks mental capacity, I can think of many examples where they have still shown us that they don't want monitoring, but by taking apart the system that's there, or turning it off, or something along those lines. So we've taken that as a sign that they don't want that in their property, and we've started to look at alternative solutions. But ultimately, it's about respecting the person, isn't it? If someone was at really significant risk, if we didn't have capacity, if we didn't have assistive tech available, then I think as a care provider, we'd have to make a responsible decision about whether we can provide their care and we're providing care at risk. So there would need to be a discussion with their best interest group around them and the person themselves about what is feasible to provide if there was that level, at that significant risk level.
Yeah, thanks, Lindsay. I've also seen Lou's agreed in the chat, says there's many devices have been torn off walls in the past. I do want to bring in some of the questions that we've had from the chat. I think they are really, really interesting to use some of the time at the end here for that. So the first one, and I'll sort of open up to anybody who wants to come in. Chris did ask at the very beginning, are we going to talk about wearables? And I promised to say that I would bring it in, and then have failed at that until now. I'm very sorry, Chris. So I was wondering if anybody on the panel has a view about wearables, what they mean. So things like smartwatches, mood rings, those sorts of things. They're not mood rings. The sensor rings. A mood ring is very different from the 90s. Sorry. Richard, were you coming in on that one?
Yeah, we offer a whole range of wearables as well as non-wearables, and again, that's just about choice. Some people do not like those wearables. They either find them ugly or clunky or and things, but most of the time there are, things like fall detectors. There are wall-based ones as well. I guess things are changing so rapidly. How many people now wear Apple Watches and things like that. So I think that things change. There's a very interesting article. I hope the lady isn't on the line, but she wrote and had a stroke when she was very young. She was a journalist, wrote a fantastic article saying, my goodness, for a 50-pound Fitbit, I would have been told that my blood pressure had been going through the roof for however long it was. It was a great article, actually, for 50 pounds. And she just said, I really wish I'd had it. And it's a story I reiterate quite a lot. We're we often get concerned about the cost of some of these things, and £50 is nothing when a life of having to recover or from having a stroke.
Yeah. Thanks, Richard. I also realised that I had my smartwatch prominently displayed on screen. That wasn't on purpose for that conversation.
Brand placement.
Non-sponsored. Amy.
Kind of, I suppose a few things that it goes back to what we were saying earlier about choice. Just because most of society is now okay with wearables and smartwatches doesn't mean that that person, like most of society are on social media, but I'm not, and I've got the right to make that decision. So it has to absolutely come down to consent, and I think we need to treat wearables a little bit more, well, not more seriously, as seriously, but like just consider that when we've looked at GPS devices and looking at introducing that as part of somebody's support package, actually there's a whole legal process to that, because we're talking about GPS locating, and a lot of these watches and devices can do that. So we're talking about court of protection, making sure it's the least restrictive option for people. We're talking about being able to track somebody wherever they are in the world. So we need to make sure that we've followed the legal framework for that, as I'm sure Lindsay is fully aware.
Anybody else have thoughts about wearables? If not, we've got another question.
May I just jump in there?
Of course.
I think wearables have offered such an amazing opportunity for some people, particularly people who maybe have some mental health needs, to understand what is happening, like, for example, sleep tracking. So being able to see the direct relationship between their mood and their sleep, or their mood and their exercise levels, those sorts of things. So it's been a really powerful part of psychoeducation. The other use that I've seen people have is being able to give their doctors, their GPs, reports that have been taken off their data, their fitness data from wearables, because where they're not able to maybe explain what they're experiencing, or have that confidence to share what they want to share with their GP, they now have a lovely bar chart or a lovely scatter graph that's telling the GP what they want to share. However, there is also, I've definitely recently had one person that very much wanted to measure their steps and their sleep, but didn't want the GPS location. So that kind of choice that we have in some of the other assistive tech, we don't necessarily, well, I don't know, I'm not aware of it. We don't necessarily have that level of choice with wearables currently.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. Really important point there. And then there's two questions, I think they're linked, so I'm going to kind of raise them together, which have been posted in the chat. I think really important points. So the first one from Christian, who's saying that they're a big fan of tech, but question the understanding of care provider organisations, commissioners, people and families to ask the right questions regarding data protection and cybersecurity, and saying that, we don't necessarily always know what to ask in this space. And you've got a linked one here from Graham as well. In the event that individuals' health data is acquired by global data centers, who would be liable for any damage caused to that individual? Richard, were you wanting to come in on that one first?
Yes, we do an awful lot in this space.
Yeah.
I have the pleasure of running one of the largest GDPR programs in Britain in past, so it's a bit of a subject dear to our heart. In any reputable firm, I mean, the key things about being compliant for a start, that's the sort of the baseline. And I think most of the companies that I deal with are all very reputable about that, and that the data is all highly encrypted. We, for instance, make sure that the data in the home is just about devices. It doesn't connect the personal data and the device data until it's absolutely needed. So that's one way of keeping security. But I think most of the companies I've talked to, they need to store the data very securely. I mean, there is no guarantee of any, as we've heard. We've had the government being had cyber attacks, things. So there's no absolute guarantee, but there are minimum standards, and I think most of the companies, there are a few, the few that you've got to be careful of. If they come from overseas, it might be quite feasible that that data gets routed outside of the EU. and which is completely illegal, and you can get fined very, very, very significantly if that's found and used. So yeah, it's more of a problem of understanding than a lot of the companies are not reputable enough to adhere to all the rules properly.
Thanks,
So,
Richard.
yeah.
And I wonder, I think that's sort of reassuring to know that most people are, reputable. But obviously, there's been some really major cyber attacks, sort of public ones, Jaguar Land Rover, M&S, in the last sort of year, and we've seen a huge increase in the public's awareness around sort of cyber threats and what that might mean. So, I sort of wonder, as care provider organizations, or is it family members, or is tech industry, sort of how are we seeing that conversations developing? Are you asked about data security more, maybe from care provider or tech industry perspective than you were in the past?
I'll be honest, and it's a bit harsh on a lot of the local authorities aren't asking the right questions of us. We tend to tell them more about the questions they should be asking and then answer it for their own benefit. There's some pretty standard stuff that you really have to do. As I say, there is no guarantee. Our software is used with the US Special Forces, so we have gone through more grueling spy checks than just about anybody, I would imagine. So it's a bit of a hot topic for us. But most of the as I say, I think most of the reputable firms are doing it, but I think the local authorities and care providers need to probably up their game. They probably need a simple crib sheet so they can ask the right questions, because a lot of them just take it on trust that you've done the right job.
Mark, anything you want to add from a local authority cyber perspective? We'll come to Adam as well from a care provider perspective.
I mean, it's really challenging for everyone whose main job is not technology. So local authorities, if their statutory responsibility for commissioning and care and that kind of thing, you're not going to get many experts. And so, yes, there is, I suppose, a reliance on the ability to, if you don't know, someone who does and you trust them. I think that's really important. Once again, bringing that kind of trust in. So there's always going to be some limitations because the way things are evolving and how complex it is, you're always going to need specialists, and you can't, unfortunately, staff either a care provider or a local authority with all the experts you need on every aspect of everything. You're going to have to rely on external people. But you're right. Things can always be improved, especially around the areas as critical as what we've been talking about, and having some good knowledge of it or awareness of who does is important.
Thanks, Mark. Adam. Oh, sorry, Richard.
Sorry.
Did you want to respond to Mark?
No. I was just going to say that I'll tell you a story that might scare everybody to death. But I was at a pub once with a friend of mine. He had 2,500 staff, and 1,000 of those were cyber experts. And a chap came to the pub and said, "Can you give me your iPhone?" And he hadn't unlocked it. This chap managed to unlock it within 15 seconds and told him about every single device he had in his home, and he printed some stuff off. And that was within literally a few seconds. And this chap had thousands of staff. So that probably doesn't give you all the confidence that you need. But I just wanted to say how that your local friend who has a bit of cyber expertise is still going to be found wanting. Sorry, I probably shouldn't finish on that.
So we all want to be terrified at the end of a meeting. Thanks, Richard. Adam.
Yeah, I think it's just worth mentioning a point about data from a slightly different perspective as well, which is that I'm slightly concerned, and I say it meant sympathetically for all different stakeholders trying to understand what's going on here. So, of commissioners, I sympathise, but I worry that there's a theme developing where people think they need to understand data as a valuable commodity, either in the sense of directions of travel towards things like single patient records and Isn't it great that we can have a whole body of data and therefore we can be a lot more efficient and a lot more productive in good decision making for health, etc. But also from a budget perspective, and budget holders feeling confident to do what I would refer as to simply as a good thing, feeling like in commissioning what we could all objectively say would be a good thing, feeling like, well, unless in the process we capture a load of data that we might be able to extrapolate from or use further down the line, maybe we won't start doing that good thing because it's become the theme that data is what's important and data is such a valuable commodity. I think the central point to all of this is that what happens when people are misunderstanding all of that is that people start understanding data as if it's some abstract thing that people can choose to trade in and so forth. People, because we see references to data sets being sold and so forth, that's what people then understand about it. The data that we're talking about in relation to tech and so forth, it's the property of the individual who it relates to, and it's for them to consent to whatever happens to it. So my point is, I really hope that commissioners don't get mired in not doing good things because they get bogged down in what they want to do with data, and think that the goal is to have as much access to as much data as possible because then we're all better off for it. We will waste a lot of time not getting on doing good things if that's what we're waiting for.
Thank you, Adam. I think that is a very powerful sort of call to action for us to end what's been a really, really meaningful conversation. And I'm very grateful to all of you for being here and for having it to explore some of the sort of difficult ethical considerations about how we are using tech in care and to make sure we're really maintaining that focus that it is about a person at the end of the day. We can't be too abstract. We can't sort of talk about these things just in terms of data, just in terms of tech, and really think about where we're keeping people at the heart of what we do. So I'm very grateful to everybody. I'm very grateful to everybody who's been with us and watching, who's been commenting in the chat, who's been providing excellent questions. There are a lot of links that have been put in the chat, both by myself and by other people. We will collate those and make sure they're emailed out to you. So don't panic if you've missed anything. That will be coming there. So thank you very much, everybody, for joining. I do really appreciate it. And I hope it's been as interesting for you as it has been for me.
Thanks, Katie.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you very